What's going on, everybody? It's Will Curran from Endless Events back here again with another Event Icons. Today, we're talking virtual events and how to do them and what goes into it. And man, everybody's just wanting to talk to people who have produced virtual events before, right? Well, I got one in the studio who just finished her amazing 3-day or multi-day, I don't remember how many days it was, but the number 3 stuck in my head because she had over 3,000 attendees at her event, 66 countries. Presenters from Google, LinkedIn, IBM, like 50 speakers. This is the ideal conference that we're all talking about. It's really, really exciting. I just got to get this week's episode started. Let's dive into that intro and start this week's episode of Event Icons.
It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of #Event Icons,
presented by Endless Events,
the show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything.
Just go to www.event-icons.com to ask questions.
Our iconic guests will answer them live during the entire show. Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better the conversation. So please help share #Event Icons
on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com.
Now, without any further delay, this is #Event Icons.
All right, so like I said, I'm super duper excited. I just have to get our guest this week up on the screen, and so we can start talking to her, and you guys can start picking her brain because she has so many learnings from these last few weeks of planning this. From what I remember too, 6-week turnaround. Chantel Megaffin from DesignX Community. She's the events and community manager over there. Just literally this was like a week ago, 2 weeks.
Yeah, a week ago.
A week ago, just finished planning this epic conference. And if you haven't had a chance to check out their website, that alone is mind-blowing. And I could talk about the website for hours, but we got to talk about this event. And I'm super duper excited. Chantel, thank you so much. First time on Event Icons. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me, Will.
All right, so let's dive right on in. I want to give people a little bit of background because I think that you are a genius in what you've accomplished in such a short period of time. What got you in the events industry and what got you kind of to this point today?
Yeah, I was actually watching a previous episode that you guys did about, I think, Global Meetings Industry Day going virtual, and I have a similar story that events just fell into my lap. I think most people say that. I don't have any formal training beyond my DES certification, but I was planning to go to law school, so I started working for Osgood Professional Development, which is in Canada, and they put on a trial advocacy workshop. And I thought it would be a great way to meet lawyers. And instead, I decided I really liked the planning part, and so I started just getting into the events world.
That is incredible. I love whenever it ends up falling on somebody's lap too, because it literally, I think that's how all of us in the events industry end up getting started too, that we never thought we would end up doing this, right? And now look at us. So I bet you as well, you never thought you'd be planning virtual events on top of it too, right?
Nope.
So what was your background to when doing this virtual event and you were super excited to kind of dive right into it? What sort of backgrounds did you have in this when you were kind of relying upon other than the DES certification?
Yeah, well, I actually started with DesignX 6 weeks ago. So
oh my God, that's even more incredible. I didn't know that. You didn't tell me that.
Yeah. So basically, right when COVID-19 started getting really serious in Canada, it was my first day with DesignX. Wow. We had one day in the office and then we went completely remote. And my boss said, we need to do something because we had to postpone our large conference that was going to happen in Amsterdam this year. And he said, we need to keep the community engaged. We need to do something interesting. Let's do a virtual event. And I was like, cool. This is my first day on the job. I don't know very much about the attendees. Like what are we thinking? So I was kind of thrown into that as well, which was exciting, but also terrifying.
That is incredible too. Like that you literally, I mean, what's kind of nice about those you were being thrown into it is that you kind of had no previous baggage to worry about too. Like you were like they probably were just like, look, do whatever you want to make this happen, in some ways, and you kind of got a fresh blank start. Was that helpful to be able to just like kind of come into it and just be like, okay, I got to go, versus like, I think a lot of planners are just kind of stuck because they're like, man, I had this conference I've been working on for years. How do I reshape it? How is that helpful for you in kind of the thinking process for you?
I think so, yeah, because I have been hearing that from some of my industry colleagues saying, how do we take what we've been doing for the last 25 years and turn it virtual? Whereas I was just, okay, we're doing something totally brand new. So I definitely think that that was a positive thing for us.
I think so too. I think I would have to agree with that. And then another question I have, quick fire question. And by the way, audience out there right now, if you want to talk to someone who has experience producing a virtual conference, and we're going to dive into this incredible content that you guys designed and the learnings that you had throughout it, because I'm sure there's even more learnings just on top of like what you guys did. But when it came to the DES certification, how helpful was it in the process of doing this? Did it give you kind of a framework to know the words to talk about, the things you needed? Talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so when I did my DES certification at the end of last year, and I didn't think that it was going to be so vital to the next little while, but I definitely relied really heavily on it. I went back and looked at all of my notes and started thinking about, what are the questions I should be asking service providers, and what are some things that you need for virtual that you don't necessarily worry about for in person. So definitely really grateful that I did that, and super happy that I had all of my notes to refer back to.
I would definitely be that person that's doing taking the notes ferociously and looking back on it and being like, oh my gosh, like I need this now. Okay, so I want to dive into this. So for anyone who has not heard about your event, can you explain a little bit about the event and what it is before we dive into it?
Yeah, so we did a virtual event called Remote Design Week, and it was a 5-day virtual conference that initially started with, oh, we're just going to do a few sessions each day. That turned into full day programming. We had 56 speakers, I believe, and we had a combination of panels, lightning talks, we had fireside chats, we had a few interactive workshops, we did some yoga breaks throughout the week, we had a live concert, and we did portfolio reviews. So it was a ton of stuff that happened in 5 days.
And there is so much content on here, which I really want to ask you a lot of questions about too, because I think there probably is some learnings potentially around it too. And because I'm just fascinated to know what was like when taking a step back for you guys, when you guys were thinking about the strategy of doing this virtual event, what was your big why for why this event existed and why it needed to happen? And like, what sort of big goals were you guys looking to accomplish?
Yeah, so I think because we are a community, we started as a Slack community, and we eventually became a physical community. We have chapters in Canada, in the States, and in Europe. And postponing, I should say, our big design leadership summit was really scary for us. And the founder, Preet, he was thinking, how can we still keep our community engaged? Like, how can we still provide them value? People are feeling a lot of uncertainty and feeling kind of disconnected from everyone. And how can we bring people together and show them that despite all of the negativity and, really overwhelming things that are happening in the world, we can still come together as a group and meet people and learn some really cool things and kind of take ourselves out of that for a while. So I think that was the biggest reason that it started. And once we got going, we realized like people really want to learn right now. They're feeling um, bored or scared or unsure, and they just want something to do. And we wanted it to be more than just a webinar, which I know lots of people are saying. We wanted it to be more than that, though. We wanted it to be a whole experience that at the end of the week, people would say, that was really, really cool. And I think we achieved that.
I think you guys definitely achieved that for sure. Um, by the way, you sparked something in my memory that I want to make sure that I give a shout out to. By the way, so for those who don't know how Chantel and I met, she's actually a part of our Slack community called Event Profs Unite. Which if you haven't joined yet, you can join at www.slack4events.com. Come join us, and that's where you can ask us both further questions and dive deeper into Chantel if you have any specific questions afterwards too. I'm sure she'll be happy to answer. Do want to give some shout outs to everybody watching so far. Tracy, Juan, Rachel says, hello, fellow Canadian. Michael says, sink or swim for sure. I see Katrina in the audience. If you're watching right now, leave us a comment. Let us know your questions as we dive deeper into Remote Design Week. So let's get into the meat of it, because I feel like if I don't ask this question now, we're going to like try to compress it in the last 15 minutes or so. What was so one interesting thing, let's dive in this first before I go into generic challenges. But one of the things is you guys had so much content, right? And I've been talking to so many planners about how sometimes like thinking about the event from like 9 to 5 is not a good idea, because that's just a long time to be in front of your computer. What did you find when you guys did that? Was that true that was hard to do? Was it better? Like what was your guys learning as far as the content design, as far as your schedule goes?
So I'll say, as the planner in our team, I was concerned, and I didn't think that we should be putting out that much content, because, you hear all about Zoom fatigue and people checking out by the fourth hour, maybe. But our founder, he was really adamant that we had really good content. We needed to get it out to people. So I thought, okay, let's give this a shot. And I was really surprised at the feedback that we got. I mean, we had people from all over the world. So we had some folks that were tuning in live with us and it was 4 a.m. their time. And they were staying awake because they just wanted to consume all of the content, and they wanted to be watching it live because they wanted to engage with people. They wanted to see what was going on. So I, as much as I initially thought that that was true, that you can't have people sitting in front of their computers the whole day, they seem to really enjoy it.
Oh wow, that's crazy. And did you guys find that the analytics matched that as well, that people were engaged that entire time, or was there like dips and valleys, and what was your kind of noticing trends?
Yeah, we were anticipating that by midweek, so Thursday, Friday, that we would have lower live attendees, but I think that the numbers stayed fairly on par with the rest of the week. So I was surprised. I'm not sure if it was, that people thought the beginning of the week was so great and they didn't want to miss anything, or maybe that we had some interesting speakers towards the end of the week. But we were definitely anticipating a drop off, but it didn't happen.
And did you guys, when you were designing the content of where things were you guys? It sounds like you were very hyper aware of this idea of the fatigue. When you guys were designing content, how did you guys kind of take that into mind when you chose specific timings of different things throughout the day? For example, if you haven't checked this out, the website is remotedesignweek.com, and you can check out the schedule. It's still up, which is super cool. And I see, for example, you guys have icebreaker sessions. You have afternoon yoga. There's lots of breaks along here. What was kind of your guys' learnings around scheduling that content and when things were especially with everyone being across multiple time zones, which I think we might have to dive deeper into too. So what sort of, dive into it.
Yeah, so I think our first consideration was the time zones. And so I sat for a long time and looked at all sorts of time zones and where they all kind of met each other. And so what would those key time blocks be? And, we figured out that our Eastern time, lunchtime kind of was like a really good time to put out content for all time zones. So we tried to put some interesting things in there. And then we tried to curate our content based on where the speaker was from and match that to the time zone, so that people were seeing things that were relevant to them. But also we tried to put a lot of breaks in, and honestly, I don't think that we took all of those breaks, because of course things run long, but also we had a lot of people saying that they really enjoyed our icebreaker sessions. So we ended up filling some of those breaks with them, and it wasn't too bad because they're not content. So if people didn't want to take part, they could absolutely take a break at that time. But if people were really craving that networking opportunity and talking to other folks, they were definitely utilizing that time.
Cool. Talk through these icebreaker sessions. So it sounds like these were really popular. People were trying to fill their only gaps they had to go to the bathroom or to eat or whatever it was. What were these icebreaker sessions, and walk me through those?
Yeah, so which I think this will be a whole other question, but software and event platforms and technology is like a whole thing. So we thought, okay, how can we still give people this opportunity to talk to one another? And so our icebreaker calls were just on Zoom with Zoom breakout rooms. And, we had 200, 300 people on these calls. So we would let them in on mute with their cameras on, and then we would put them in breakout rooms. They were able to, usually around groups of 10 or 15, they would be able to talk to one another. And then we had a dedicated Slack workspace as well. So once the breakout rooms closed, we had a lot of folks that would go into the Slack channel and say, breakout room 7, leave your contact information here, or breakout room 1 was the best. We please stay in touch. So it wasn't anything too fancy, but people really, really enjoyed that opportunity to meet different folks. And I think it really helped that it was all over the world because, we got to meet people from countries that we probably will never go to.
Ooh, interesting. And because this was part of this Slack group that already existed, did you find did this sort of stuff already happen inside the Slack group naturally and you guys were just enhancing it? Or did you find that this was a great chance to also just be like, this is the first time we're randomly pairing people together? So for example, we have in our Slack group the donut thing, right? That allows us to randomly pair people. Did you guys have any sort of mechanism inside the community as a whole? Or was this that mechanism for them?
Yeah, we didn't do anything like that before this. So this was the first time we tried it, and we were really nervous because we weren't sure that people were going to be comfortable talking to strangers. So we weren't really sure. We did the first one, and the response that we got in the Slack group kind of proved to us that it was working. People wanted to meet more, they wanted to meet for longer. They were saying, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, it's not enough. We want to talk to each other for longer. We want to have more opportunities for this. So we kind of had to pump in more networking than we had initially anticipated.
Ooh, okay. So learning definitely is that more of this. Like people are craving this human interaction. Would you say more than the spoken word content that was happening overall? Would you make that and I get that probably there's all this debrief that's probably still happening as it's going along, and I'm not holding you accountable to this actually happening next time. But do you think that you can foresee in the future that you guys will have even more icebreaker sessions and kind of those opportunities in the future?
Yeah, I definitely think that for the next virtual event that we do, we have to use more of that time for networking. And we had gone back and forth with this idea of facilitated networking versus non-facilitated. And, we didn't facilitate it. We put people in a room and we let them talk about whatever they wanted. And I think that that worked a lot better than if we had maybe tried to give them a question or a topic to talk about, especially right now during this time, because people just want to interact with other humans and it might not be on the specific topic that they're attending the conference for. It might just be learning about someone. We had a ton of pets that joined us, so learning about someone's pets.
That's awesome. I think it's so interesting that you guys didn't give them any topics. Like this was unstructured, unfiltered time. And I think you bring up a good point too, that right now, as we're, for anyone who's historically listening to us, maybe, in the future, that we're going through this quarantine time, we're all locked in our houses, that we all are craving, instead of having, we're getting tons of social time, right? We're in meetings, we're on calls all the time. We have game nights, things like that. But people are kind of almost looking for this unstructured, let's just sit on a laptop and just shoot the proverbial shit kind of thing, what other learnings did you have around these icebreakers, and how can someone who is looking to do these sort of sessions, not necessarily, as we always talk about, is who cares really what platform you use this on, what system, but what sort of learnings did you guys have as you guys were doing it? For example, is there a certain size it worked? Talk me through other learnings you had around these networking setup, small group discussions.
Yeah, so we really tried to keep it around 10 to 15, and I think 15 is the higher end. I would say the ideal number, just based on the feedback we got, is maybe like 8 to 10 people. Um, and that's just so that there's enough time for each person to talk. And also, this happens at in person events as well, but there's always some folks that are louder or more comfortable talking and they can kind of take over the room. So, I think the more intimate that you can make it, the better. People will feel more comfortable. People will want to talk about things and it gives them enough time. I think, too, something that we um, will consider for future is the amount of time, which I briefly touched on, but I think upwards of 20 to 25 minutes is that sweet spot. We tried it for 10, we tried it for 15, and people said that was not enough time. We wanted to spend way more time talking.
So walk me through the kind of the ideation that you've kind of had now. Now knowing that, do you think that you would go to, for example, a 10-day conference with just lots more ice breaking, so that way you can get that equal amount of content out, or do you feel like that you're going to axe content and decide to do less of it now moving forward?
Yeah, I think we're going to take the latter approach. I think we're going to reduce the amount of content and include more networking opportunities. And I mean, that gives us more content to put out later.
I like that approach too. Then that way you can do remote design week like 3, 4 times a year, right? Talk me through. So we skimmed kind of the surface on it, these time zone differences. And I think that's where a lot of people are also struggling. Talk me through the strategy you had with these different time zones and what specific things did you, what things worked really, really well for being able to engage this international audience on all these different time zones?
Yeah, I think that we are lucky because we already have a chapter in Amsterdam. We have a chapter lead there, and we relied heavily on her to talk us through time zones. I am terrible with time zones. I will be the first person to admit it. I never get them right. I always get confused. It's really difficult for me. So, we really spent a lot of time just looking through the members of our Slack community and seeing where they're located and trying to pin down a few key zones that we were going to focus on. So we're based in Eastern time. So obviously that was a key consideration. And then knowing, okay, we have a lot of people from SF, we have a lot of people from Europe. So we tried to take into account that we obviously weren't going to get everyone all the time. But what, as I think I mentioned before, what are those key blocks of time that we can put content in that the most people can watch? And I think it worked well. I mean, beyond the folks that stayed up ridiculous hours to even just network, our closing social happened 6 p.m. Eastern, and we had people. It was 5 in the morning, and they hadn't gone to sleep yet.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, just shows also how you have a devoted audience, how much people really care to get this content, to be a part of this something, to be a part of this one thing. It's almost like the idea of like, staying up super late to go to the bars afterwards and hang out with everybody. You're gonna be tired the next day at the general session, but screw it. It's almost like that to an extreme.
Yeah.
And I love that so much. I have a million questions, and we're getting some audience questions. Shout outs to Ryan. Thank you so much for joining us, Ryan. And Melinda, Susan, thank you so much for joining us as well. So one interesting thing I wanted to make sure that we noted on here too, and I want to talk about more of this time zone thing before I pivot back into content for Melinda's question, is that on your website, this is brilliant. You log on, and you know how normally it shows you all the times for the conference, and obviously it's in the time zone of that city you're attending, right? But with this, you need to automatically change. And I think you know where this is going. I'm going to praise you guys for this. But the coolest feature I think about this, it's so subtle. If you log on the schedule, it automatically changes the schedule to your time zone and shows you the schedule in your time zone and says, hey, like for example, mine says schedule is to load in your local time zone of America/Phoenix time zone. And I think that's so brilliant. Not having to choose a drop down, switch it over, because it's just assumed like if you're in this spot right now, this is what the time zone is going to be in. And it makes it easier for people to go, okay, I know where this is going to be. So I'm sure those people who are thinking about 5 p.m., they didn't have to think about crazy conversions. And I can see that that's why you guys thought about this. And I also want to give you guys praise for using an existing data set that was your Slack community, because I think Slack has an integration. I'm pretty sure that, let me know if this is how you guys got it. I think it has an integration that lets you see where everybody is in what different time zones, and I'm guessing that's how you guys got it.
I can't take credit. One of our Slack coordinators, she pulls all sorts of data for us.
Cool. Shout outs to the Slack coordinators. But get that like geeky person who can figure that data. But like I'm thinking about how people can do this even if they don't have an existing community. But like maybe looking at, for example, all the different countries and cities that are visiting your site that are interested in your conference, spit out that data and say, okay, we had 20% come from United States, Eastern time, and break it down by those different time zones, and then say, okay, instead of trying to please everybody, let's pick the ones that are looking at us the most and are most engaged. I love that. And that was, seriously, such a great breakthrough for you guys as well. So I want to get to Melinda's question. So we're going to backtrack to content. So she brought up a good point. You were talking about potentially axing some content and making more room for one-on-one networking. So she wants to know, how are you going to determine what content to include? So talk me through what stuff worked really well for the content and what stuff you would never do again. And what was like the things that you'd want to keep, or, walk us through like your content decision process.
Yeah, well, our founder is really fabulous. He knows a ton of people in the design community. So, um, initially, he started reaching out to some people. We had a call for speakers on our website, and we started getting incredible people. We had speakers from Google and LinkedIn and PayPal and Amazon and IBM, and the list goes on. And so we really had to think about, we chose to theme our days, and they weren't like super structured, but they just gave us some sort of idea of where a particular topic would fit. And I think that definitely helped us determine what content was relevant for this particular event and what content could we, reach out to that person and ask them to join us for a future event. It's definitely difficult. And I think that we had to turn some folks down that we really wish we didn't have to, but the amount of content we were being given was crazy. So we really tried to focus, as I said, on the themes per day and also what we thought would be of value to the most people. So I think, again, we're really lucky that we have this Slack community because we know a lot about the people that follow us. We know where they work, we know their job title because they share that in the Slack community. So we're able to think, okay, do we have more design leaders, or do we have, more junior people? Do we have people in the middle? Kind of what does our attendee base look like, and what will they be interested in? And that's how we tried to narrow down on the content while also kind of throwing in a few things that would cater to everybody.
Nice. What was the top, other than the icebreakers, because that was the easy question, what was the top most successful type of content, like format that worked really, really well for you guys?
Yeah, we had 2 fireside chats, and I think in the future we should do more of them because people really liked having two people speaking. They're able to play off of each other, and you feel like you're in the room a little bit more than when it's one person presenting on their own. I'm not a huge fan of panels personally. We had a handful, and they did do well. I can't say that they didn't, but for myself personally, I don't love panels. So I think the fireside chats were very popular, and they're something that I will definitely be pushing for more of.
Nice. I like it. I definitely think, and that's one reason why I think like event icons can be a really successful show, is when you have people kind of bouncing around. I think sometimes when we have our 5-person groups inside of event icons, it gets a little much because just like you're getting a snippet from everybody versus like really diving deep with you, for example. Another thing, here we go. Another question coming on in. I'm not even able to read this one 100%, but Melinda's asking, let's go ahead and bring this on up. Did you push content relevant to your industry, or just focusing on what's relevant right now during this pandemic? And how for example, has this pandemic affected you? So how did you guys balance kind of current events versus things that were more evergreen?
Yeah, that's a really great question. We definitely tried to focus the content to our industry while also being sensitive to the fact that we are in a global pandemic. So we had a few folks that touched on how the pandemic has affected their design company or their design team, and what they're doing to encourage their teammates to take time for themselves and practice self-care while still moving the business forward. So there were a few people that touched on that, but for the most part, we were also trying to provide content that was relevant regardless of the fact that we're in a pandemic, because I think, as I touched on earlier, sometimes people just need a break from what's going on in the world. And I think it was a really, really good opportunity for that. One of the sessions that had really, really positive response was by a woman named LaDonna Whitmer Willems. And her talk is called Permission to Speak. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the design community. It is just her sharing her story about being comfortable speaking her mind and taking up space, and people absolutely went crazy for that session. We had so much feedback about it. So I think, to Melinda's point, you just need to find the balance for your particular industry. And the pandemic has absolutely affected us. We have had to postpone our Design Leadership Summit, and all of our in-person monthly meetups that we do can't happen as well. So we're still trying to find ways to engage our whole community.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I love that answer to that question too, and finding that balance. I think that goes to show, like, for any conference too, like, you always have to strike that balance between what's relevant right now, but also what's evergreen and what's most relevant for the community. There's another piece of your guys' event, and then I'm just going to dive into like general learnings that you had, because I'm sure stuff I don't even know about that you want to share too. But the one thing I wanted to highlight on here is on Monday morning, you guys have this kind of registration platform onboarding, which I think is super duper cool. Like, we're used to conferences where, hey, here's the time to go get your badge. You have a certain amount of time to go get it. They'll be around our ways, but you almost turn like receptions and things like that. Talk me through that registration and onboarding process. What were you guys doing, and why was it helpful? Was it not helpful? What was kind of your guys' thoughts around it?
Yeah, so because we were using a platform that we had never used before and that none of our attendees had used before, we thought we would set aside some time on that first day and just be available for people, encourage them to go through the platform, look around, ask us questions. Our founder pre-recorded a little walkthrough video that we shared during that time, so people were able to dig into the platform and see, okay, this is where I'm going to watch the sessions, and this is where I can network with people, and here's how I can add something to my schedule. So just giving them that dedicated time to do that, because I think for virtual events, if you don't set that time aside, people won't set it aside for themselves. They'll say, okay, the event starts at 12 p.m. I'm going to be there on my computer at 12 p.m. And then they try logging in and they're like, oh my goodness, my login is not working. I can't figure this out. They get frustrated and they miss content. So if you set that time aside for them, absolutely, some people may not use it, but other folks who really want to take part will be there and they'll work out the kinks before the content starts.
That's so cool. So clever. I think that's so smart. Was the video inside like an email before they got on the platform, or was it embedded in the platform?
It was embedded right into the platform, yeah.
Nice, nice. So did you find that out of the people who attended these sessions, what was like common things that popped up, or like, was it like people just perusing? Was it pretty easy to use? Like, or did you find that like, man, that like made or broke like a lot of people's ability to get on the platforms?
Yeah, I think it gave us a huge opportunity to work out some kinks that we hadn't anticipated. And I'm really glad that we did it, because there were some issues with the integration with our registration system and our actual event platform. So some folks that should have had access didn't initially. So we had to do a bit of manual work there. And we wouldn't have figured out all of those people beforehand. So I am glad that we did that and that we gave them an opportunity to log in early so that we could make sure everybody was set up properly.
Nice. Nice. I like that. So we got questions coming in from the LinkedIn side of things. Steve wanted to ask, and this is everyone's favorite question to ask right now, what platform did you use, and what was kind of your thoughts around it?
Yeah, so we used a platform called SwapCard, and we have been through, as I'm sure everyone has, a million demos, it feels like. The reason we went with SwapCard is because their support was really great. We had a dedicated event person that we could reach out to, and they answered all of our questions. And absolutely, there are some gaps, and there are some things that didn't go very well. But for the most part, I think we achieved our goal and it worked for what we were trying to do.
Nice. And then Steve also has a follow-up question wanting to know how much of your content was live versus simu-lived. Was all of it 100% live or was any of it pre-recorded? What was kind of your mix?
So everything was live. And as an event planner, somebody who had just done their DES certification, I wasn't sure if that was the right way to go. It leaves so much opportunity for error and mistakes, but people, for the most part, we had very few technical issues, which was great. And I think part of the reason for that was because we did really thorough tech checks with our speakers the week before, just going through some really what we may think is basic stuff, but really just making sure they were comfortable. Um, in the future, we may look at some pre-recorded stuff, but I think that having it live was pretty good.
I love it. Awesome. All right. So getting some questions in. I think we got some late comers coming in, and maybe we have already covered this a little bit. So I'm going to try to frame this to make sure that we covered some new information. And you feel free to just bring up something totally unrelated when coming in too. But Karen asks about attendance growth. Very big question. I know it's kind of hard to see us behind all the video. But Karen asks, by doing this, do you think that you had a much larger audience by doing this virtual versus doing it if you were to do it in person?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Karen. And I will just say that Remote Design Week was not even a thought when I started. So no tickets were sold in advance. But we definitely increased our attendance by doing a virtual event. Um, as I said, we had people from 66 countries. So we would never have had those folks attending our in person events because they're strictly in Canada, US, and some parts of Europe. So I think that we were able to hit a huge audience that we would never have been able to get to before this. And, 3,000 attendees do not come to our in person events.
I would definitely agree with that. Yeah, like it'd be really hard to get people in 6 weeks, 3,000 people to show up to a conference, book tickets, fly all the way out, and everything like that as well. All right, the questions come flying in the last half of the show. So Adam asked a little bit about networking. I would just say, Adam, go back and check out the first half of the episode. You talk a little bit about the icebreakers and things like that. If we get a little bit extra time, we'll come back and maybe talk about some other networking opportunities. But definitely go check that out. Chantel had some awesome ideas when it comes to icebreakers. Go check it out at the beginning half of the episode. But there are some good questions coming in on LinkedIn. So let's go. Oh, they're asking you about challenges. Are you ready for this? Let's go with the more broad one. What were your biggest challenges? Lisa asks. What were your biggest challenges and what didn't go as planned?
Well, Lisa, our biggest challenges were definitely tooling. We took a really long time to pick which tool we were going to use. Because we cater to the design community, the UI and the UX of these tools are super, super important. I'm sure they're important for everyone, but we have an extra critical group of people coming to this event. So we have to be really mindful about the tool that we used and what it offered and where those gaps were so that we could try to fill them beforehand. One of the things that didn't go very well was so it's very convoluted, but how we streamed our content was our speakers logged in through Zoom and they basically just had a Zoom call. We streamed the Zoom to YouTube Live and then YouTube Live into the platform. It's a whole thing. So, what didn't go very well was I think it was 2 or 3 sessions that YouTube Live just decided it did not want to connect with our Zoom call. So, that was obviously very stressful. What we ended up doing was just posting the Zoom link for those sessions and having people actually come onto the call muted, but they were able to see each other. And people really, really liked that. So I don't know if we'll be doing more of that or trying to figure out how to still get the attendees FaceTime. But that was one of the things that didn't go well. And what else? I'm trying to think. Can I come back to that one?
Yeah. I think that we'll definitely come in. And Lisa, feel free to expand if there's any additional questions when it comes to challenges. There's another challenges question I'll bring up, but I think you bring up a really good point that a lot of planners are struggling with as well. You know, when we're producing our virtual events with our clients, all of them are struggling with how do I recreate this small group discussion conversation and not do it in Zoom. And Zoom has, as much as like they have security issues and we don't like the user interface and you have to click it and they open up another window and, you know, all the problems I think that reason why we don't want to use it, it does small group discussions so well. So the question becomes, you know, like, what is that going to look like in the future? But I'm sure a year from now, or even if you guys decide to do this 6 months from now, there'll be another tool out there that does this too. So that's one reason why I think that we always just don't want to like hesitate to be like, yeah, we're just like, I would totally recommend this tool because 6 months from now, they're going to be so better out there. So diving into some challenges as well, Steve wants to know, I know you kind of hit it a little bit, technical challenges. What other sort of like major technical challenges did you guys run into that you didn't kind of expect?
Yeah, so one of our speakers who was from Google, Google is not allowed to download the Zoom app, Google employees. So this particular speaker, we tried to fill out some forms and see if we could get her the clearance, but she had to use the web app. And I don't know if anyone has used the Zoom web app, but it is not good. The audio and video are out of sync. The camera quality is it's not where it should be. So that was obviously something that we couldn't really do anything about it. She wasn't allowed to download it. We had to make it work. Thankfully, she was on a panel, so there were other folks to look at, but her video was not great. Some of our other technical challenges, which I think I mentioned, was with YouTube Live and with Zoom as well. Integrating those into our platform were a bit of a challenge. It was super manual. I had to pre-schedule all of the live streams and then set all of the Zoom meetings and put the streaming information into the Zoom call in advance. So I'm hoping, well, I know there's an easier way. I just don't know if the tool has everything else we need. So, you know, I think every single event platform right now is trying to get there. It's just,
we
I don't
all
know.
want it to happen now rather than in 6 months, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No. I'm definitely there with you too. And, you know, I think that we could probably do a whole episode talking about, like the intricacies of the live stream integrations and things like that too. But that's one thing that I think for everyone to be hopeful of right now is that the technology is moving so fast. And because the market, like you, is willing to spend money and invest in this right now, that money's going towards the development of this stuff all day long. All right, so kind of diving into some more kind of questions that we're getting in from the audience before we start to wrap it on up. Karen's asking about for the future of your events. Do you by the way, do you ever see yourself? Let's start with the easy question. Doing this in person, and when we're allowed to see each other in person again. Do you ever guys see you do it? And then I guess the question is, do you consider potentially what hybrid's going to look like to continue to grow your audience further and further? I feel like the second half of the question is a heck yeah, but I guess the better question is, do you think you'll ever go in person again now having a successful virtual conference?
Yeah, I think that still for now, in person is important. And I think once we get to whatever our new normal looks like, in person is going to be what people are craving. So absolutely, I do foresee us doing in-person events again, but also absolutely to the hybrid model. I think that it is so incredible that we were able to hit all of these different countries, and we don't want to lose those folks, and we also want them to still feel engaged and like they're getting something of value. So being able to still kind of stream out that information to people all over the world will be really important for us.
Absolutely. So what if you had to go back in time and you had the ability to go back in time, knowing what you know now, what sort of things would you have told yourself 6 weeks ago to be like, just don't do this. Don't even try. Like, this was bad idea. Don't ever do that again?
I think the key thing was not making a decision on the tooling fast enough. And something that actually myself and the founder were talking about today was you can't pick your formats and then try to find a tool to make it fit. You should pick your tool first and then set up your format so that it fits within the tool. Because it's really difficult to say, we're going to do, I don't know, some particular format. And then you realize, you marketed that, or you said you were going to do it, and then your tool just doesn't allow for it. So then you're trying to backtrack and find another way to accomplish that. And you can save yourself the stress and the anxiety around it if you just pick your tool and you choose formats that your tool does well.
Ooh, that's kind of what's interesting is that's everyone in the comments are going to blow up and be like, that's the opposite of what Will says. Don't do it. But I think what is important, though, is that I think within the context of 6 weeks to plan it, yeah, like for sure, do not get locked into committing to anything, right? But if you have maybe a year to plan this, then maybe you can strategize, then get your tool, and then still have the time to redo the content. But you guys were probably like, so I don't think you said this yet. What point? How far out did you guys have the platform? Like 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out?
I think it was a week. I want to say a week.
Oh my god! So you guys had to get like all the content in there, make sure it worked, and then I'm sure I'm guessing there's something that you were like, we're totally gonna do this, and you're like, how are we gonna make this happen now that like we have to figure out how to hodgepodge Zoom and the live stream together? Wow, a week out. That's crazy. Everyone should totally like hit that like button and the love button for Chantel for pulling off. Essentially, you had to build the entire event in a week. But I think, though, interestingly enough, that also shows the power of virtual too, because, obviously a lot of events get planned in like kind of a day, right? We get a day to load everything in, the event happens, and we tear everything down that same day. But it just shows that like you guys were able to turn around. I'm guessing it was a lot of long nights though.
Oh yeah.
Instead of it being like the one long night of load in, it was like a week long of like, all right, gotta enter this, write this description, all these things like that. Man, that's absolutely crazy. Everyone's going nuts in the chat right now too. Wow, that's fantastic. All right, so we only got a couple minutes left when it comes to this, and I want to definitely make sure that we answer these questions because I know that you got a lot of cool stuff up your sleeve. So, but before we go into resources, which is my favorite question of all time, what if you had to give one tip for planners who are planning a virtual event? What would be your one tip for planners planning a virtual event?
Yeah, I think what I learned is you need to ask every single question you could possibly think of to the company that you're thinking about using. We missed on some pretty key things that we just hadn't considered, and we only found out that there were gaps in our tooling during the event. So really think about what's important to you, what's important to your attendees, and what are your must-haves. Because one of them for us, I think, Will mentioned that the website schedule, it updates to your local time zone, but our tooling did not. So that was quite confusing for people, and something that we, did not. We just assumed that that was absolutely a thing that was going to happen.
Wow, that's very, very interesting. And so I'm guessing, did people have to manually choose your time zones, or no, it didn't at all? It only had one single location, so you had to basically. Wow, okay, very interesting. I think that's so smart, and like, I think having more time to play with your tools and understand it fully, and fully understand your technology if you're implementing, because you guys self-implemented tool. Like you didn't have like a production company doing this for you or anything like that as well. So making sure that you had that time to test, I think was very, very critical when it came to it as well. I'm going to ask you one more question related to a tip. For anybody out there who is looking to do this by themselves and implement a platform by themselves, what would be your tips for those people as well?
I think one of the things that really helped us is we bugged our team to like try things with us, jump on this demo with us, does this look good? Does this sound okay? What do you think about this? So, like, really make use of the people around you, even if they're not actively taking part in the planning or in implementing that software. Ask for their feedback, because once you get so close to it, it's just a blur. And, our team was able to say, what about this? Maybe you should try this way. Maybe you should add this instead. You're missing this really important thing, like a link to our Slack group. So definitely make use of people. And if you don't have a team, maybe you're just a person of one, reach out to the event community. I think we're all pretty willing to help each other, which is awesome.
I can't agree anymore. Like, you'd be so surprised at the communities that end up surfacing as well. All right, so we got a couple minutes left, and I know you got a ton of tools in your toolkit. So walk me through, like, what are your favorite resources? Where do you go to learn stuff? Where'd you go to, favorite things that you have when it comes to planning or just in general in life?
Yeah. One of my favorite resources, and something that I think a lot of us are looking at right now, is, I'm probably going to get it wrong, but it's like the Event Marketer's Guide to Technology or something like that. And it's this amazing Google Sheet that was put together by some people, that have a really good breakdown of tools, what their capabilities are, as well as like some definitions, like what is a hybrid, what is a webinar, um, because people don't really know what that means. And so that was a really, really good one. I plugged away at that one, looking at all the different tools, and trying to narrow down what was going to work for us. And it's so good because, for example, we knew networking was going to be important. So if a tool didn't offer that, then we just moved on from it. So it was really helpful. Also, I'm part of a few Slack groups, and I just asked questions, and people, as you said, well, people are really, really open to sharing their learnings. So, I mean, make use of people like me who made mistakes and also had a really great event, and your other colleagues. And what else? My DES certification, as I said, I spent a lot of time going through all of those notes, and PCMA and MPI, all have really great webinars around virtual events, but also just like crisis management, and how to kind of change your messaging so that people understand, like, we get it. We get that it's a really scary time. We still want to put something great together for you. Um, yeah, I think that's all.
I like it. I like it. I'll give this as another chance for us to promote the Event Profs Unite Slack group. If you want to join, www.slackforevents.com. Chantel's on there. She's also really awesome because you message her, she'll message you back like right away. That's how we end up making this episode happen within the week of her finishing the event. So thank you, Chantel. Also, too, I think also I wanted to give some praise for the PCMA DES course. Great content in there. You're going to see a lot of familiar faces that have been on event icons, and some really familiar faces. Can't talk much about it right now, but stay tuned for what's coming down the pipeline, but some good stuff coming down the line when it comes to that as well. So if you're looking to learn about digital events, that's a great place to start. Wow, so much good stuff. Chantel, I seriously have to thank you so much for coming on the show, being willing to share your mistakes that you made. I know the wounds are fresh in a lot of ways too. So it's like, oh, I never told anybody about this, but I just recognized this yesterday. I really appreciate you willing to share this, but like, this is where people are going to learn so much from, not just the people who are saying, look, I did this so successfully, because your event was a huge success. We spend a lot of time talking about challenges, but people are going to really learn so much from your challenges. So thank you for coming on, being vulnerable, and sharing a little bit more about your event as well.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Well, thank you to the audience, Linda, Ryan, Tim, Melinda, Karen, Steve, Lisa, Juan. Oh my gosh, how many more people do we have in here? Let's see if we can give some more shouts. Bernie. Let's see what else we got in here. Shouts to, oh my gosh, I'm going to slaughter this one. Let's go for the Italian name, Zio. I think that's how you say your name. You guys, thank you so much for coming and joining. That was just a couple of you guys joining live. thank you if you are watching this pre-recorded as well, or on the recording. You are awesome. But the live is definitely the best place to sign up or check it out too. So if you do want to be part of the community, make sure to sign up at www.event-icons.com. That's also where you get our Facebook group invite, where we bring together awesome icons like Chantel, and you can ask her anything and network and continue the conversation too. So go check that out. Well, I'm going to stop blabbing on out. It's Friday afternoon, so we got to get out of here. Thank you guys all for joining us for #EventIcons. Thank you for watching live, audience. You guys are awesome, and we'll see you guys all next time on Event Icons. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of #EventIcons.
To catch all the bonus content, resources mentioned, and an invite to our Facebook and LinkedIn groups,
Head to www.event-icons.com. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway. Just tag your post with #EventIcons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #EventIcons.